Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you are. I'm Susan Longhenry. I'm Director and Chief Curator at the Haggerty Museum of Art here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I want to welcome all of you to this dialogue with artist Tomas Saraceno and Dr. Somesh Roy, Assistant Professor of Mechanical Engineering at Marquette University. As you may have guessed from my introduction, we are a diverse group convening in virtual space. In fact, we have registrations from 14 countries and 22 states. So I want to extend a special welcome to all of you. And in fact, at this point, if you want to put in the chat where you are, that would be interesting to see who we're all gathering with today, where in the world you're coming from. I also want to acknowledge that in addition to our participants in the world of Zoom, we are broadcasting this to the Midwest Art History Society Conference in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I want to say hello to all of our Midwestern art historians joining us today. Thank you. This topic is very appropriate. We have a global audience for a topic that relates to the planet that we all share. So I'm looking forward to a wonderful conversation. This program is in conjunction with an exhibition at the Haggerty Museum of Art called Tomas Saraceno, Entangled Air. That exhibition is on view through May 21st. And so we'll put a link to that exhibition in the chat as well, so you can get a sense of the context for our conversation today. The other piece of context is that this is our annual or occasional, perhaps, Curtis L. Carter Art and Social Change Lecture. That is a lecture named for our founding director, Curtis Carter, who had tremendous vision for the role that the arts can play in advancing social and environmental justice. So thank you, Curtis, and thank you to everyone who makes that happen through that fund. A few housekeeping pieces. I would like to ask that you all be sure to mute yourselves. We want to be sure we can keep the focus on our program presenters today. And if you have any questions, please put them into the chat at any time. We will have time for questions and answers after the presentation. We would love to hear from all of you. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Jennifer Johung, who is Professor of Contemporary Art and Architectural History at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She holds a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley in Performance Studies, an MA from the University of Surrey, London in Art and Performance Theory, and a BA from Brown University in English and American Literature. Her most recent book, Vital Forms, Biological Art, Architecture, and the Dependencies of Life, was published by the University of Minnesota in 2019. And we are very pleased to have her join us today to lead us off with our conversation. So please welcome Dr. Jennifer Johung.
Thank you, Selena. I'm truly excited to introduce our two guests today. Tomas Saraceno is an Argentina-born, Berlin-based artist whose projects dialogue with forms of life and life forming, rethinking dominant threads of knowledge in the Capitalocene era. For more than 2 decades, Saraceno has activated projects aimed towards rethinking the co-creation of the atmosphere, including the Museo Aerosolar and the Aerosene Foundation, towards a society free from carbon emissions and the abuses of the Capitalocene. Saraceno's work with local communities, scientific researchers, and institutions around the world aims to seek out a more equal balance of human, techno, and biodiversity, with the understanding that knowledge is produced from specific situations. He has held numerous residencies, including the MIT Center for Art, Science, and Technology, Atelier Calder, published in Nature and PNAS, presented a TED Talk, staged artistic interventions with COP 20, 21, and 26, has lectured at Princeton, Columbia, Centre Pompidou, Herald Design Forum, Hirshhorn Museum, CCK, and Interspecies Internet, among many other locations. He has also been the subject of solo exhibitions and permanent installations at many museums and institutions internationally, including the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, Museo de Arte Moderno in Buenos Aires, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, again, among many, many others. Saraceno has participated in numerous festivals and biennales, including the 17th Venice Architecture Biennale and the 53rd and 58th Venice Biennales. In conversation with Tomas is Dr. Somesh Roy, who is an assistant professor in mechanical engineering at Marquette University. Dr. Roy's research attempts to unravel the mysteries of black carbon, commonly known as soot, which forms during combustion. Black carbon is part of fine particulate air pollution and contributes to climate change. Despite the ubiquitous presence of these tiny black particulates in the air, our knowledge of fundamental processes behind the formation and evolution of soot is still lacking. Dr. Roy operates within the field of combustion and aerosol science, studying the formation of soot at an atomic level in combustion systems, its dispersion at the atmospheric level, and the perception and mitigation of its impacts on a personal and social level. Dr. Roy obtained his PhD in mechanical engineering from the Pennsylvania State University. He has published in research on combustion and soot in numerous peer-reviewed articles and presented in national and international conferences. He has been awarded the prestigious NSF Career Grant to explore fundamental explorations of soot. So I thought we could start our conversation today with each of you talking about your research, the project you're working on now, and perhaps also this exhibition Entangled Air that's at our Haggerty Museum of Art.
Thank you.
Tomas, do you want to start?
No, thank you, Roy. Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody, for have organized this beautiful conversation. Yeah, I was saying before off the camera that I've been ill during the last days. This means if I'm not so loud or so clear, please wave your hands. And I can say that I'm very, very enthusiastic and thank you. And I'm so pleased that that of the exhibition of Entangled Air. And yeah, Dr. Roy, we have a small rehearsal the other day, and yeah, I'm kind of keep learning every time you explain more and you tell us a little bit about the history and for the black carbon, the soot, and all your field of knowledge is kind of is a big encyclopedia. I mean, I don't know where we want to start it, but I'm curious to keep learning from you.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Johan, for the introduction and giving us this platform as part of this Art History Conference, as well as being able to talk to everybody around the world. And I keep looking on that direction, not at the camera, because Thomas is being projected on the screen just beside me. So I don't mean any disrespect to anybody who's I'm not being able to make any eye contact. So my research, as Dr. Johan said, is about unraveling the history of black carbon, and black carbon is also known as soot, and soot is everywhere. And I mean, I'll start with the claim that the history of planet is synonymous with the history of soot, because when the planet formed, there was a lot of fires, a lot of wildfires, and every fire produces soot. So it started with that, and then if you think about history of human civilization, the torch that cavemen used in going into the caves and living inside a sheltered environment, that the luminosity comes because the fire produces soot. Without soot, it wouldn't be that yellow and luminous. And soot was also one of the first pigments that the cavemen used in their cave painting. So it's been there since the history of the planet, history of the civilization, and it's here today. It's the second most important factor in climate change. So by trying to look at the basics of physics and chemistry and the processes related to soot, I'm basically trying to learn the life history of soot. And by doing that, essentially, I'm trying to learn more about the history of the planet itself so that we can go for a better future. So that's, in a nutshell, what my connection with all these and what I'm trying to do. I know this sounds really vague and big, but that's where I'm trying to play my role. And as we were working on part of it, as we were working on soot research, part of it is that every one of us are actually producing soot and breathing in soot without knowing or knowing or unknowing, but we still don't realize that basic fundamental properties, physics, chemistry, all those things of soot is still not known completely. And also, we don't always think about soot unless, or think about black carbon unless we see big smokestack rising and things like that. But it's there everywhere. So that's part of it. We were thinking how we can talk to everybody how we can present that it is there and it's affecting our lives in so many visible and invisible ways. And that's when we saw your work at the Shade, Thomas, and we started talking, and that's how this exhibition evolved, Entangled there, because Thomas, your work also trying to make these invisible things visible to everybody else so that they can think about it. And we're also trying to do similar things so that people start thinking about it, not just the impact it does, but also what is it. And I keep saying that if you don't know our enemy, we can't tackle them. So it's my role is to try to make us a little bit more knowledgeable what we are trying to deal with. So
Amazing, amazing. I remember, yeah, thank you. And it's so amazing what might have brought maybe, as you said, no, how was the first maybe representation in the cave paintings where maybe we soothe at the same time. It seems that also for the vast majority of the population on Earth today also might become also something which is extremely affecting lives on Earth, no? And I think so part of this exhibition and a work which is exhibited with the title "We Do Not Breathe All the Same Air," refer a little bit about, I don't know if you want to see images or not. Rachel, I don't know if what's the idea, but what do you think? Should I share the screen and show something? Or?
Absolutely. If you can share your screen and show the artwork with not all breathe the same air,
yes,
it'll be great.
One second, and I will try to whiteboard right here.
So as Thomas is trying to share,
I think so.
yeah.
Let me see. These ones.
Yeah.
Which are a series of dots that when you get closer, these dots, they looks like more or less like this. And these dots are collected from a machine which is called beta alignment machine, a BAM machine, which what it does is suck air at a certain frequency of time. Every hour it's sucked for a certain period of time, and it deposits. It's kind of a filter. It's like what we will have usually during Corona. Now we all became aware that the breathing for a long time with the mask became more dark, and depending on where you breathe, there will be more darker in relationship of the environment where you breathe. And this means what it gives you is hour by hour is a collection of dots from this scientific machine. So somehow it gives you the amount of particulate matter, PM2.5 or PM10, which is accumulated in the air, and it's by sucking the air through this vacuum cleaner, somehow it deposits into this filter. And then you see hour by hour how contaminated, let's say, was the air. Now, the title of this work, it comes from the book of Harriet Washington, and I will read this quote in the book, which is, the title is A Terrible Thing to Waste, Environmental Racism, and its assault on the American mind. Harriet Washington reports to tell a story of unequal distribution of pollution along geopolitical and racial lines. And it's a consequence of the Capitalist era. Among the most striking statistic, she reported Black families making $50,000 or $60,000 per year are still profoundly more affected by pollution than white family making only $10,000 per year, revealing that race, not class, is the most determining factor in access to clean air. I mean, I think so. When I read that, and I think so, Roy, when we started the other day, the conversation is striking, how much, when we said that it's a global problem, that everybody is affected. No, the same narrative that we have had during the pandemic, and we are is everybody is affected. But I think so there is a huge inequality of who is affected more, no, due to the environmental condition and to the exposures to these particles. That was a little bit kind of the entry point of understanding how and who is exposed to this particle, right? We were started talking the other day, and I think so now to going back to the cave painting, we know in a lot of places around the world still the soot is byproduct, and you can tell us a little bit, but there are many households still that cook with fire inside in the houses, no? And these produce a lot of soot, which is so harmful for their lungs. A lot of people live near autobahns, I would call highways, where still are much more affected. And it seems, at least in the case of North America, the high exposures are people of color. Does it mean we a little bit, by the time that we were doing the exhibition at the shed, it happened the case of George Floyd, where he exactly said, I cannot breathe. And that was quite striking. It was not only about we don't breathe all the same air, but many people are not even allowed to breathe, not even which quality of the air, but there are people who cannot, that they are prevented the ability of breathing. And for me, Roy, for me, I don't know if maybe I turn into a more a question to you, is how this beauty and the same harmful relationship is distributed around the world. And you coming from India, no? If I say it correctly, and then we can work and go maybe to the next work, because I think so. This work, which is also printed matter, referring a little bit about your country, my country, but let's say it's also by sometimes this you find it in many countries. Is a print which the ink is black carbon, which had been extracted by the air. Is a small startup in India which produced this ink, and the ink is really like it's black carbon which is extracted by the air, in this case from the air of Mumbai. And then I refill a tank of the printer, of inkjet printer. And what you see, it's all black carbon. And what is printed is one of the, there is also cosmic dust, right? As Dr. Sameshev tells us, which they said by statistics, there is one particle of cosmic dust, not terrestrial dust or soot, which come from outer space, and it touch every person, every human one time per day. This is a picture from this catalog that NASA had produced in 1982. And I printed kind of these kind of micrometeorite. I don't think so it's called meteorites anyway, but it referred a little bit to this idea from, that climate change might have occurred in the planet Earth when these huge meteorites have hit the Earth and have completely changed the climate and altered the life on Earth. And at the same time, the relationship with this artwork was more reasoning that these very tiny particles, almost invisible, are producing a climate cataclysm as these huge meteorites which have perturbated on Earth a few times on life on Earth. And this means it's kind of almost when you see then this light beam also, I refer all the time, I say, like, look at these flying bullets which are killing so many people around the world. See it like, at the same time, there are beauty, It's something that, you get fascinated when you see through the lights and the shadows and comes, and also you send me some beautiful text that is mesmerizing, the rainbow, how clouds form through pollution. But at the same time, I'm kind of more and more, I think so, the kind of more dark narrative that somehow the pandemic have shown us.
I completely agree that these definitely look so beautiful and striking. This particular matters, which is this is what I always think of seeing when somebody talks about making the invisible visible. This is dust and particular matters in a normal, regular room. you just need to shine the right kind of light on it to see it, right? But when you see it, it's at the same time, it is so beautiful looking at those patterns. I have seen people, and I've taken my students in there, I've seen them like just staying there and interacting with it for minutes at end, and they're just fascinated by it. But at the same time, when you think about that, we are all breathing in this, and we're talking about a very clean, relatively clean room compared to the air of Mumbai, where we got those inks from. And it doesn't give me any pride because yes, I'm from India, and India probably has half of the world's most polluted cities in the top 10 list, which is not something that I say with pride, but unfortunate fact that it is. And part of it is because what you are referring to is that there is this unequal distribution of an unequal impact of all of these things in different parts of the world at a global level, at a regional level, also, as you mentioned about that the black folks being exposed to more roadside pollution, industrialized, because they live in beside the road, they live in more industrialized belt, and for various other reasons. So it is, I mean, there is definitely an issue of disparity and inequity there. And at some point, I always think about it, the fact that we are having this conversation, we are coming from a place of privilege because we can talk about these things. We can think about making art, but for somebody who has to cook their meal at a wooden stove at their house just to survive, and we can think of, we can put the image of public health concerns of smoke or climate change concerns of smoke in that person's head, because eating is more immediate, or eating is more immediate than that. And arts like this kind of incites those questions to whoever comes in and visits, because this exhibition is in Milwaukee. It's a relatively clean city in the United States, and students or whoever is coming, they don't always think about these terms, that yes, this air also has such dark spots. Then what's happening with other places which are not visibly clean like these cities are. So I think that's an interesting connection that we're glad to have this type of displays in the museum, so that can bring more questions.
Yeah. No, and Roy, and I mean, it's exactly what you said, is like, the global north, or let's say the 1% or 30% of the population who have the possibility to change and who are the responsible, who have emitted such an amount of black carbon into the atmosphere. I mean, it would be very interesting that you tell us also for how long it stays. The other day, I remember the permanency of these particles, and also relationships. And when we go to rocket science and so forth and so on, but the underline also, I think, so the conversation, we will always try to think about which concrete actions the privileged people who have the capacity to reflect on certain issue, it should be taking, and a little bit revision also the policies around the world. For example, I know that in Germany now, in a couple of years, will be banned let's say we are talking about a country which is very different of other countries. I come from Argentina also myself, but it will be banned the possibility to have burning wood inside a certain radius of certain cities, because it pollutes a lot. And I mean, that's one of the policies that now that policy in the global south, as you have said, is not applicable and with the right, because food, the ability of somebody for cooking, you should not prevent their capacity, right? This means, because you have been working also on improving a lot of also engines and other systems that somehow go hands in hands of who might have access and which possibility we could have with that extent. But yeah, tell us a little bit. I love this when you explain a little bit kind of a global picture also again about global warming, climate change in relation with particulate matter or Sooth.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so this is black carbon. We call it black carbon from the climate science point of view. This is usually called black carbon, and soot is the most colloquial word. So basically, they are the same thing. And black carbon because it looks black. We always keep, whenever we talk about black carbon soot, we always sort of become kind of, and this was a conversation earlier on, that kind of pessimistic about, okay, what can we do? Because it seems like there hasn't been that much progress in curbing all of these things in context of the global emission. We talked about global south. There's still a lot of fire going on because it's a necessity there. But there is also a little bit of hope. I think that's when you asked me about the life cycle of soot. Usually the life cycle of soot is just a couple of weeks. So whatever we are emitting now in terms of soot or black carbon, that particular amount of soot or black carbon is going to go away from the air in a couple of weeks. It will get deposited due to rainfall, or it will get deposited in the trees and things like that. So technically, if all of us collectively can stop producing soot now, in 2 weeks we'll have much cleaner air. But that's not possible, right? But the other thing is that because its lifetime is 2 weeks, the soot can only travel that much of distance, just few thousands of kilometers or few thousands of miles. So soot produced here in the United States is not going to reach India. Or soot produced in India is not going to reach the United States. But soot produced in the United States or in northern part of Europe is going to reach the Arctic glacier. Soot produced in India is not going to reach the Arctic glacier. So if we think about in these terms, the melting of glacier is more exacerbated by the soot and black carbon produced by this northern hemispherical, these countries, rather than places like India or so. So, and when the glacier melts, when soot gets deposited on the Arctic glaciers, it increases the rate of melting because it's a strong absorber of heat. So it increases the rate of melting, and that means sea level rise and all those things. But locally in these North American countries, or in these countries, the air quality is not getting affected that much because still the amount of soot being produced is significantly less than the amount of soot being produced in India or in some other parts, some of the developing nations. So the responsibility, the equity, the inequality of distribution and inequality of impact, these things are very nuanced issue, and it depends on from which viewpoint you're looking at. And for somebody, it's an immediate, for somebody, not my problem.
One question, Roy, if you say Roy or Dr. Somesh, I don't know. Roy, it's okay. Now, one question that I have, because Sooth also, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is responsible sometimes of the formation of clouds, right?
Yes, it is. It is absolutely. Okay. It is responsible for cloud formation, and it is one of the main reasons why the monsoon patterns are changing in the tropical and equatorial region because of soot. One of the main reasons, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons. Yes.
No, and then just to explain a bit, you correct me if I'm wrong because you know the science. But basically, it's a particle who is floating in the atmosphere, and then around this particle is much more easy for droplets of water to condensate and to start to form, something like this, right? My question.
Yeah. You're right.
And then my question is, okay, if, and you always correct me, how far, and then if soot helps or is one of the cause of forming of clouds, then clouds could travel longer than soot alone. And this means when we said, I'm trying to speculate that this idea of soot, how much it imply really into the changing of the climate, right? Because clouds might travel much longer than what, or no, or how is this science models?
Honestly, I don't know how longer the cloud can travel before becoming rain or some other precipitation, some other form of precipitation. But even if the cloud rains in different places, that's going to change on a level of the climatic conditions and weather at some other place too, because it's all. That's why I love the title of this exhibition. We're all entangled in some way. I mean, through all the things that we're breathing in and we're experiencing.
No, I tried to think of this analogy because you very clearly say when soot is deposited on the glacier, then the glacier get darker, absorb more heat and melt faster.
Yeah.
When soot it goes into the atmosphere, maybe turn into a cloud, which cloud also interesting enough is there are these layer of protection, right? Because it changes the albedo, reflectivity of the earth, and then from somehow it bounces back, the heat. But when it depends also on which altitude. But nevertheless, I'm getting too scientific because I want to learn about your knowledge. But I thought one way to think a little bit about that. Look, this is another experiment, because I've been obsessed also of, because also airplanes produce a lot about these micro trails that also affect a lot how climate it's formed and this constant trail that you see when airplanes fly around. And I mean, of course, cars and combustions and you should tell us, Roy, all the improvement you have done into that also to improve. But in this case, we also the same kind of hacking, let's say, we try to bring with black carbon and try to make evidence of that. This kind of another artwork, which is part of a community that we are working together with more people, which we call it Aeroscene, as kind of a epoch shift change, just to give it the name of a change for good, instead of the Anthropocene or the Capitol scene, we call it the Aeroscene as a name of trying to opt in for good. And in this case, we try to kind of think about different ways of how we can relate with the atmosphere. And in this case, again, what we kind of build this envelope, and then inside this envelope, we put inside, because these startup, it gives you a small bottle with black carbon extracted from the air. It's concentrated. It's like graphene, It's like you can shake it. And we drop it inside this sculpture, this balloon, this envelope of air. And then by static electricity, it generates kind of a black carbon inside cloud. You have a highly concentrated black dust cloud and a little bit on the surface. Now, you see in the image on the left, you see a black balloon only. Now, the black balloon in that case fly only with the heat of the sun because it warm up only the air which is inside by the surface, which is colored. But the other one, the rays of sun goes through the transparency and the volume is all black. This means you get more lift somehow as long as you can maintain. Because Roy, you also said that soon after 40 minutes it falls. I mean, you collect it in the basket. This means it's a little bit of a way of thinking also how much the air get warmer where you have black soot in the air suspended. And that was a way of also of showing it and demonstrating it in a very basic way.
Yeah, absolutely. That Aeroscene, flight by Aeroscene and black carbon, that is also eye-opening in so many levels that yes, you can harness the amount of change in air temperature and make a balloon fly with a human being also, right? There is a record of half an hour after that flight in a balloon laced with black carbon. So think about
Yeah.
how much heating of air that soot particle can do. That's, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, that breaks the boundary in terms of how we always think about, it's not going to change much, how much is going to change, or things that the impact of that, depending on at what scale you're looking at, can be huge.
Yeah.
Actually,
No, no.
we are planning to make one Aerosine here at the end of the exhibition. So
Oh, amazing.
I'll be happy to share the updates.
That's amazing. Yeah, and because also you sent me an article which, I mean, I'm thinking about fire and how much fire is visible, or I mean, in the case of burning, but also in relation with the sun. And I'm thinking because the way, I mean, I don't know if I need to go a bit slower, but the Aerosine, just for general thinking, in this case, it's really a community. In this case, we collect a lot of plastic bags from different places around the world. It's an alive community. Anybody could do it and build it, and then we tape it all. We form these canvases. Many turn into places where people leave their messages. And when the sun comes out from the horizon and warm up the air, which is in the interior, it kind of rise up into the sky. And I think that's a little bit the principle of letting, just with the sun burning, it's enough to maybe think about other ways of moving or mobility. And that's the very basic principle. But yeah, I was wondering about this, or the rainbows, or all these things that, it makes something visible.
Yeah. So basically at the core of it, this is a particle, right? So when a light falls on it, depending on the shape or which direction the light's falling on, basically the color of the light it's falling on, it's going to reflect or scatter away, or it's going to absorb the light. And so how it's going to interact with the light depends very much on the shape, size, its actual composition. And those things are still kind of, we know that these things happen, but the basic science or the basic physics behind it is still yet to be unraveled. So when I see something like this, and when I see, talking about those filters or talking about those particular matters in a light beam, it gives me more questions in sense, so can we use something like this to learn more about the exact physics of the particle, exact physics of the black carbon, or can I feed that back into making such creative things and letting people, giving people more things to think about?
And one thing, Roy, that might be a bit more complicated, that we start very slightly start to talk the other day about, because as we know, and you might know, and I'm curious if you have been approached and what is your relation, because we know that there are a lot of projects about geoengineering, right, today. Yeah. And we know that there are a lot of investment and arrogancy from still part of some humans of wanting to, and I wonder that your knowledge and your studies and your fundamental physics of understanding this particle, if you have been approached by projects of geoengineering, and if you could tell a little bit what are these projects, and I hope that you are not really in favor on that.
Well, to be honest, I am kind of out of my depth when it comes to geoengineering, because we are talking in geoengineering, we are talking about a scale which is the scale of the planet essentially, or at least scale of nations and continents. My role or my expertise lies in a smaller scale. I'm trying to understand the fundamental properties of how these particles form, which can be utilized, which can be used to translate this knowledge to projects like geoengineering and other stuff. Now, about things related to geoengineering, I share your notion of a level of arrogance I mean, and I sometimes feel like that we as human beings do assume that we have a lot of agency over nature, and which
Some
may-
human, not all.
some human, yes, yes. Indeed, some human. But we really don't. We are part of the system, and trying to change the system from within the part of the system can be sometimes foolhardy, if not done, or if not attempted judiciously. But that being said, maybe there are aspects of geoengineering that maybe there is aspect of our attempt to change our behavior that can eventually alter the balance of the system. That is a balance of the system for the good. And right now, what we're doing, we're altering the balance of the system for bad. But if we collectively change our behavior, that changes the balance of the system. Could you call it a geoengineering tool? Because you're changing the behavior of the geological nature at geological scale. So I don't have any hate for geoengineering. I need to be careful about what we're trying to do. That's my viewpoint on that.
No, what? It's right. And somebody in the public might know more than us about terminologies or which I think so. The words, I would say social change, instead of geo, the geo without the social component is like, I don't know, one book that always was inspirational for me, Felix Guattari, when he always talked about the three ecologies, about social ecology, mental ecology, environmental ecology, as they give the agency of the social aspect of the kind of more ecosystemic practices is something which might be really something that's somehow the comfort zone of each of our disciplines somehow lock us within the inability sometimes to really put forward political agendas that somehow, what I'm trying to say together, Roy, we should form these alliances between art, science, politics, in the terms, and when we talk about geoengineering, just for the public or for whoever we are talking, we know that the geoengineering projects, as I understand it, are really, let's say, there are these huge multi-billionaire people around the world which are experimenting to form huge clouds, artificial clouds, by releasing a lot of salt into the atmosphere. But there are other methods which might alter radically by artificial methods in a very short time the climate of the Earth. It's like almost producing this. You remember when was this huge explosion over Iceland, the aviation stopped for a period of time because there was a lot of food and plane could not fly. And then in Chile it happens a lot, and in Argentina, you see sky is completely changed. This means that's what we call, what I understand are these hugely proprietary, monopolistic, multinational, private almost enterprise who benefit only few corporations. And sometimes what I see is like sometimes basic kind of fundamental physics might be used and utilized for then the benefits of that huge project. And then how much in academia, how much we can have kind of binding links. I'm proposing, coming from a scientific family, who also might say, well, but this could not be used, my knowledge, to that that technology, you know what I mean? It should be in favor to favorite other social bonds which are different than, and you know, and this means what are the Creative Commons, what are these alliances that somehow establish us relationship that might really, you know, and you know, I'm thinking about science and the projects of how colonialists also have impacting into the knowledge of what we call TAC, traditional ecological knowledge, no? And how much still today certain form of knowledge are in clash with other form of knowledge, no? And it seems that when we talk about extinction, you know, with Erosine, we are working a lot about that prioritizing that's or try to weave that form of knowledge, no, together.
Yeah, and that's that's what I love about breaking boundaries and talking and this type of collaboration. We have to build collaboration across all disciplines. Otherwise, yes, we risk boxing ourselves into a situation that is not solvable. We have to come out and get together. I completely agree. One last thing about geoengineering, I was thinking about this when you just mentioned. I do find it really fascinating that we are reaching to that level that we can alter cloud formation, and the physics that as a scientist, I'm selfish about my curiosity, and I really want to learn about how can it alter these things. So that curiosity, I think that's what drives the society together too. So that discovery, that wonder part of geoengineering, and that something like that is feasible. I applaud that adventurous spirit, but I think we have to be judicious about that. I will leave it at that. So I think
I could not hear the last thing. Sorry.
I said that we must be judicious about how we are applying this knowledge about what we're learning. The learning is fascinating, but then applying, that's where our responsibility comes in.
Well, I don't know. I'm tempting to say it's like, because how, the patent system, gives such proprietary knowledge, and how much universities also sometimes, and I study in university and we are in a university context, but, I think so that more alliances, you know what I mean? We need on maybe, on really, political work also around it, that and economical works. Yes.
Yeah. It is an entangled problem, and we are entangled in it together. So we have to come together to untangle ourselves from this entanglement.
Yeah.
I think I will take this opportunity now to interject. We have some questions in the chat that go across science and soot and your work, Tomas. First ones are about soot. So Stephen in the chat, who's joining us virtually, has said, I've read that we have data for the ambient CO2 levels of around 280 parts per million.
Parts per billion.
Billion.
Yeah.
2,000 years ago. Do we also have data for ambient suspended particulates of 2,000 years ago? Can you comment on various industries touting incineration as a form of recycling? Do we have that data from 2,000 years ago?
In terms of the air quality or in terms of particulate matters? I don't know, honestly, Stephen. I have to research on that before I can tell yes or no to that. Usually when people talk about air quality from 2,000 years ago, this is what I know is they're basically digging deep into the glaciers or ice sheets and things, and basically extracting the captured air and analyzing that. So I don't know if they are also doing it for particulate matters and things like that. So I'm sorry, I can't give any more answer on that. And
what about the incineration?
Incineration.
Of recycling?
Incineration as a form of recycling, as a blanket statement, it's hard to qualify whether it's good or bad. Now, typically when we're doing any kind of burning, be it incineration, be it waste burning or whatever you want to do, if we are doing any kind of burning at a centralized space in a mass scale, it is much easier to tackle the pollutant emitted from there. We can have an additional system that will capture the pollutants there, and we can use that pollutants to make something. So that is possible. So in that case, incineration could become useful too. However, if you're doing incineration at a small scale, like let's say we tell every household to do incinerate their waste, it's not going to be useful because we cannot implement pollution capturing device in every household. So at a distributed level, I don't think incineration should be thought of as a recycling thing. But if you're talking about an industry that is using incineration as a process to make something else and capturing all the pollutant emissions, maybe. So it depends on how you look at it.
A lot more questions about what emits soot. So do volcanoes emit soot?
They do, not exactly from the volcanic lava emission, but those volcanic hot lava go outside and they burn stuff around it. That's what emits. Soot is primarily when you are burning something that has carbons, which is usually any kind of vegetation or animal or any kind of life form or something that was life form at some point, like coal and fossil fuels and things like that. So that's where soot comes from. Soot is not the only particulate matter. So the volcanic emissions also emits a lot of these things called ash, which can be a lot of metallic ash, sulfur-based ash, and all of these things. It doesn't have to be always just carbon. Soot, we deem soot as something that is predominantly carbon. So anytime you are burning something from the candle at your house to smoking to barbecuing outside, we are producing soot, and your car
And Sarah, in our virtual land world, has also asked about rhythm. Do rhythms affect soot?
so rhythm as in
How different rhythms are created by soot? Maybe Sarah will elaborate on that. We can move on again about, okay, wildfires. We go through all my what creates soot questions. Wildfires, yes, I imagine.
oh yeah,
In a huge way.
It's a huge amount. It's a huge source of soot, among with other particulate matters too. Because wildfire, I know we had a talk about soil. Wildfire changes the humidity in the soil. That changes the particulate matter emission from the soil, dust emissions from the soil too. And wildfire is a huge emitter of soot because we're burning lots and swaths of organic matter
No containment.
with no containment. It's hard.
Can you imagine that if there is more burning, it survives longer or it moves farther, or you're still in the 2 week?
You're still in the roughly 2 week period, but then 2 weeks, if you have wildfire, you get much stronger wind flow because of the change in the air temperature. So wherever the wind can take it in a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, that's New York. I mean, you can see soot from California wildfire in as far as in New York. So it travels by the wind, and it travels by, as Sarah was pointing out, that it travels by the cloud also. I mean, it can be trapped in the clouds.
In that way, it's more visible too.
It is. Smoke is much more visible and tangible and feels immediate.
Right. You understand it.
Yes.
This way. Some soot questions. Why do we know so little about it? That's something.
Well,
We have you.
how long
And
time?
the loss.
How long time do we have?
Well, it's been around forever. I mean, we've talked about it from the beginning of time.
Yeah.
The fire being central to humans. And yet we're now just really starting to think about it from various vantage points, artistic. Do you have a sense of why versus other things?
I mean, why we know so little about soot. I can give a scientific explanation, and maybe Thomas can give an artistic explanation why we have not been dealing with soot that much. So soot, because it comes from burning carbon, and carbon has this property that it can bond with various elements in numerous, infinitely possible ways. Carbon is what we are made of, right? So because it has so much propensity to change, like it can do anything, basically whatever. So that's why properties in the particle, the nature of soot particle can also vary a wide range. In fact, I'll go as far as to say that each soot particle is like a snowflake. There is no two completely identical soot particles in the world. And as they're different, their properties, their impact, and if somebody who's studying soot in a particular scenario, we still don't know whether the knowledge from that particular scenario suit is going to be applicable to a different type of suit. How many different types of suit are there? So these are the things that sort of bothers us. At the end of the day, but we still don't know exactly. And since there is so much variety, and we're talking about scales 10,000 times smaller than a human hair. We're looking at that scale. Slight little variation can alter things dramatically. So soot can have cooling effect in the atmosphere also. By forming clouds, it actually reflects sunlight and that can cool the atmosphere, but it also can have heating. And how it's going to behave depends on its properties and what exactly we're analyzing. So all these complicated interactions among various things makes it difficult to understand the basics of soot.
And Tomas, do you have a perspective from your end of things as to why nobody has really been talking about these kinds of particulates?
I think so, Rachel. You could. We have seen a lot of crises in museums around the world, where many donors, which come from the fossil fuel industry, are not being accepted anymore. This means I'm doubting also, and Roy, also to think with you how much scientific inquiry might not be fully supported, because there are a lot of private interest from huge corporations that they don't want to know how malicious is thoughts in the life of people, because there is, as we know, everywhere there is a multi-billion company. Look at Exxon, look at, you know, I don't want to name them, but it's huge, and I think so. You know, I think so. There might be something there also. How you know, democracy needs to push other agendas and other. You know, because it really, I mean, I don't know on statistics, but I think so. The bad quality of your air, I don't know, it's third or the fourth reason of mortality in the world today, right?
Yeah,
I don't know what
it
is the
is.
first. I mean, you can tell me statistical better, but you know, when you read also, I mean, I remember the article of, I don't remember, it was one year after the pandemic. Forget about numbers, I'm more an artist, but the article was very clearly said, look, during the first year of pandemic, I have died so many people. And in the same year, 5 times more, the same year that, you know, 1 million people die of pandemic, but 5 million people have died of bad quality of the air. And we know exactly how to stop it. There was, I mean, we don't need to invent any injection of some, stop driving your car when you can. And the privilege who can, you know what I mean? And it's much more deadly. That was the coronavirus. And I mean, there is something there that we know exactly the reason, we know exactly the consequence, which is between the 1 and the 30% of population of the world who have the privilege and who have the obligation to change, it needs to change.
Yes.
And-
Well said.
About the statistics, Thomas, I think soot causes more death in the world than malaria and AIDS combined.
There we go.
So
Yeah.
Thought maybe we could end this by thinking about, we had a question from, again, the virtual world, and an opportunity for you guys to say something, but to think about artist science alliances. You ended your conversation about that. So can you think about the pragmatics or efficiencies and any dilemmas that might limit how artists and scientists participate with each other? What does artistic thinking bring to the table that scientists need beyond good PR? Possibly pushing the horizon of what is thinkable. But this is to extend where you ended up in your conversation, thinking about collaboration. What does it mean on a ground level? And what can we hope for thinking to the future? And then also to add in there, Tomas, if you want to talk about work that you're doing now or thinking about in the future.
I can add that question. What does it do beyond just PR? Actually, as we are preparing for this exhibition, we are setting up those displays. Me and my students, we were discussing about when we were displaying those soot particles and looking at their shadows and stuff. That gave us ideas on, oh, maybe we can analyze these things from that angle, and that could give us some information about the morphology of this particular structure. So just at a very mundane level, just looking at something very differently gives you ideas. I mean that it is obvious when you think of it, it should, right? But preparing for something intentionally, preparing for something as an art display, that opened a lot of, that gave us a lot of spark in terms of, okay, that's a technical scientific calculation that we can do using that.
And seeing it in a different
And seeing
scale.
it at a different scale, seeing it at a different, yeah, seeing it at a different angle. And actually, there has been research which can be used to analyze old paintings to find out about air quality data from the past. So art can augment to the science as well. We just have to be open to it as scientists.
Yeah. No, yeah, it is. Yeah. No, I'm wondering, I mean, it's, you know, big multinationals have managed to do not pay taxes and corrupt democracies around the world, right? And even the taxes that we pay, it seems, are endangered by social system of communication and so forth and so on, about how big data is handling now with artificial intelligence. I mean, it seems, and this, I mean, what I'm trying to say, like, we need to urgently form alliances, because I mean, we all come also, you know, Roy, we say like, Tomas, you know, you might ask you, look, I have a project, Roy, will you volunteer, I don't know, 10% of your time to do something else which is beyond, you know, to help communities in some places in your own home country, you know what I mean? Sometimes we lack this ability, because I mean, we are faith in our democracy, but it seems that we need to move to some transnational agendas, alliances that somehow have some, beside voting and all the tools we have in the democratic system, but to really push the governments and the policy makers to produce the change that it needs to be changed. You know what I mean? I don't know what, you know, how to, you know, how to, you know, work more together, you know what I mean? And dedicate more time on forming that new policies that it seems that are urgently needed somehow. And then I keep asking questions also when we do exhibition, when we present papers in science, who is benefit ultimately? You know what I mean? It's still feeding the same family that it's already know that knowledge. You know how we could. I mean, I don't know. You know, those are the things that I'm asking more and more. You know what I mean? Is doing exhibitions. I mean, somebody asked what I'm doing. You know, I mean, I'm doing it. You know, I'm trying to doing exhibition in places which are not inside museums. You know what I mean? There where we went. In the Salinas Grandes with indigenous communities who are pretty much affected by lithium extraction, by the energy transition that the North is pushing to that community. And then, you know, just only that by doing the same work, but doing it somewhere else, you know what I mean, it produces a lot of change, you know what I mean, because it's a slight change, but it's for me, I mean, it's very inspiring, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if we have time for probably one more question, and then there's a lot of specific stuff that I will pass on to you, Dr. Roy. There's a lot. People are really getting fired up about this. But again, this starts from creating alliances so that we see things differently and think about things differently. So in the room, are there burning questions? I put it here. In the room? No? Okay. If not, we've extended past our time because this conversation was so interesting. I hope everyone will see the exhibition over at the Haggerty in Tangled Air. Follow Tomas, the cyberspace or arrow scene, I should say, arrow scene. Let's do that. Let's make balloons.
Yeah.
and
A small thing, if you want, Rachel, on beginning of April, near Paris, if you want, I will then post something on, or you could send it over. We are trying to now make a new flight of floating because particles float more than fly, and they are more aerostatic than aerodynamic. I don't know, Sue, what do you think, Roy, about that? But we will attempt to fly a much longer distance, and or maybe 2 passengers. It's been whoever is interested, we will stream it live, and whoever is near Paris, we will try to the last 32 world record was 60 minutes and 800 meters. This time we will try to do a couple of hours and much longer distance. I mean, who knows where we will fly with the suit.
Yeah, please share the details and yeah, we'll circulate.
Yes.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you both so
Thank you.
much. And so now.